Not so right women. Please put your hands together in welcoming the moderator for this, Miss Priya Malik. Please clap, ladies and gentlemen. I'd also like to call on stage Ms.Anita Nair, Ms. Shradha Singh, and Ms. Aastha Atray. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and help me welcoming these fine ladies on the stage this morning.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our fellow panelists today. It is always lovely to meet women who are not so right according to the society or according to literature or according to cinema, because it is high time that we stop expecting women to be right according to the society's definitions and the society's ideals. I think it is 2018 and it is we who decide what is right and what is wrong. And that is pretty much going to be the theme of today's panel. We have with us women who are writing. We have with us women who are publishing fiction. We have with us women who are talking about their experiences, their lives, and how they have translated it in their works and given, I would say, a lot of Indian authors a voice. And just to give you a little bit of a background, I grew up reading Western literature, and I'm sure most of us did, because Indian literature wasn't always available. Indian literature wasn't always accessible. How many of you here grew up reading Mills and Boon's women? Me? Yes. That's all. I studied in Dehradun, in Convent of Jesus and Mary, and the only romantic novels available in my days were Mills and Boon's. So I always knew a Jane or a Mary or a Kim. I never knew that there was a romantic fictional heroine called Priya or Aastha or Shradha. So it is very refreshing that I think Indian literature has come up, and thanks to women like you who have kind of pioneered in that area and brought more voices forward and made it more contemporary. Just to start with, tell us a little bit about what you write, Shradha, and I'll pass on the mics to each one of you, and then we'll get started. Yeah?
Okay, hi. So my name is Shradha, and I've written my first book, which is called The Guilt Pass. So The Guilt Pass is it's a romantic erotica, and I've been with radio for last 13, 14 years. I'm a radio host, a radio programmer. I had Ishq 104.8 programming. And you were talking about Mills and Boon. So I grew up in a small town, Ranchi.
Right.
Okay, and my whole house setup was really very interesting. I lost my father when I was in class 8, so my aunt moved with us.
Right.
Who was a divorcee.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really an interesting family because two women were heading the family.
Okay.
My mom and my aunt. So they were very sure they were liberated women, but they encouraged you to take charge of things, but they discouraged you to to be an outlaw.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised in a very confused kind of family, like, and I was always rebel at heart and always a person of extreme.
Right.
And I loved Mills and Boon when I was a young girl.
Young girl.
And it was actually very funny because in my school, Mills and Boon was, given in library to girls who they wanted to. So I think,
wow.
Yeah, that was actually very stupid because teachers had some own notions. Like
Biases, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, but I grew up reading Mills and Boon under the cover of my H.C. Verma physics books. So I really wish that when I grow up, I wanted to write something which women can read, not under the cover of H.C. Verma physics book, but they can read openly. And when Juggernaut as a publisher came, Juggernaut is an app book.
Yes.
So they were looking for writers who can write, and you don't have to hide your books under some cover.
You don't need a pass. You don't
Yes.
need a guilt
Yes,
pass
yes.
to be reading.
So I think that was a wonderful opportunity, and so that was my first writing experience, and
Beautiful.
it was widely accepted by people. A lot of people called me. A lot of newspapers called me to ask me about the book because it was on polyamorous relationship.
Yes,
So
and
it was something very
I
new.
do have some very interesting
Yes.
questions for you later on
Yeah.
about that as well,
Sure.
because that fascinated me.
Sure.
Thank you. Anita, coming to you, I was reading a little bit about you and I realized that your work is a little bit different because there's a lot of heritage involved in your work. There was a lot of mention of Kerala. So tell us a little bit about your work and take it on from there.
I guess for me, writing was something that I did, very unconsciously. So I was at my most unconscious best when I wrote. I really didn't worry too much about how it was going to be perceived and how it would be, looked at by the society or my family. In fact, I remember a journalist from Outlook asking me, "Doesn't it bother you that your mother might read it?" And I said, frankly speaking, my mother was probably going to be more bothered about the gray in my hair than about what I write about, because it doesn't even, it doesn't even come into their reckoning. One,
Right.
they don't even, fortunately or unfortunately, my family don't really read too much of what I write, because for them, I'm still this, mad harem-scarum person and not the serious writer.
Aren't all writers perceived that way?
Well, no, I do see a lot of writers who have families who read every word that they write. Not in mine, though.
Right.
I'm not talking about my son, but I'm talking about my parents and
Your family,
siblings
mom
and
and
so on.
dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so for me, when I started writing, it was this thing about I have a certain thing to, certain spheres of interest that I do want to write about. And if the route to that fruition of that idea is through using sex in my writing, I would do so. And I was absolutely unconscious about it. And I've maintained again and again that sex is just another appetite. Like eating or drinking or whatever.
It's a biological need.
Yeah, it's a biological need, and there's no need to feel embarrassed about it. There's no need to, make it this cloak and dagger affair and stuff like that. Let's celebrate it like we celebrate. So again, in my writing, I celebrate heritage. I celebrate food. So sex is another element of, celebration for me. That's all it is. I'm not giving it more importance than it deserves, nor am I going to underplay it because I'm conscious of how I would be perceived
Sure.
by the world.
Sure.
So for me, writing has become primarily a medium to pass on whatever it is that I feel, and I feel very intensely about. So there is absolutely no holes barred when I write.
Beautiful, beautiful. And same question to you as well, Aastha. A little bit about what you have done, where it came about, and how that is being perceived at the moment.
Hi. I wrote India's second Mills and Bones. I am a Mills and Bones author.
Awesome.
Yeah. When Mills and Bones first came to India, they were looking for Indian voices.
Yes.
And I took part in a short story competition, and that short story won. And I wrote a Mills and Bones, which is set in Bombay, and it was called His Monsoon Bride.
How refreshing. And what was the heroine called? The protagonist?
Amrita, I think, and she's
Amrita?
also a journalist.
Awesome.
Yeah, like me. So I'm essentially a journalist. I've been a journalist for 15 years now. I work for Sunday Midday, and I write about people, and that's my beat. But yes, 11 years ago, so I wrote India's second Mills and Bones. Then I wrote another chick lit for Rupa called Games Girls Play. And I self-published a book last year, which was an erotica. And I'm writing my next book with Juggernaut, which is also an erotica. And also I sing, so I released 2 songs last year, which are also about love. I think everything stems out of love. I write poetry on Instagram, which is also love. So I have like one theme, and I'm doing many things around it. I actually, growing up, did not read Mills and Bones because my mom didn't allow me to read those books. So Sidney Sheldon's and Mills and Bones were like not on my agenda. I used to read Enid Blyton's. I grew up writing Enid Blyton kind of books, like where all my friends were and I were on an adventure. So
Right.
for a long time, I actually didn't know what I wanted to write. I wanted to write, but I didn't know what was my
Forte.
speciality, as you would say. Yes.
Right.
So when the short story competition happened, I wrote a math short story about where there was like a chocolate fountain or something, and that won. And then I realized maybe I can write romance.
Maybe
and,
there is a voice out there that you have, which is distinct.
So I think I'm very, as a person, I'm a very romantic, naive person. I believe in the good. I believe in love, which is very rare these days. So yeah, so I write about love. I won't classify and say it's erotica or it's romance. I write about love and how we deal with it in our, I mean, how it's relevant. Like most people relate to me on Instagram, like lots of people write to me and ask me love advice because I've become heartbreak girl. I write about heartbreak. So actually I get 10 messages a day saying.
So the Instagram love guru.
Yes, I have become, like my husband's actually telling me stop answering. You're always on the phone. I said, but yeah, that's what I do. So I think I write about things which we all relate to. So it's about love as we are feeling it right now. So.
And love is lovely. And we all love to read about love, I must admit. So I write a little bit as well. And I publish columns for Hindustan Times as well as I do a lot of spoken word poetry. And the reason I am a part of this panel with all of you today and moderating is because I realize that our society wants women to write in a certain way, but there is a certain section that is coming up which is changing, and that is mainly the youth. And talking about erotica or talking about love or talking about sex very unconsciously. There was a poem that I wrote which is called Right to Pleasure, which hit like almost 1 million views on YouTube. And even though a lot of youth appreciated that here was a woman reclaiming her right to pleasure, reclaiming her right to love, but there was still a very broad section of the society which said, oh, ऐसे कैसे बोल सकते हैं, or ऐसे कैसे लिख सकते हैं. And that brings me to you, Shradha. Writing erotica, erotica is not new to India. You know, I'm sure we have all heard that line before. We are from the land of Kama Sutra, and we all always talk about the Ajanta and Ellora caves, and we talk about how that is also a part of our society and our everyday living. How did that break out for you? Was there a lot of criticism along with a lot of fandom? Where did your voice take you? And how do you differentiate the male gaze from writing erotica, which is good to read, kind of like pleasing to women?
I think there is a different aroma of freedom and liberation if a woman writes an erotica, because she's writing from her point of view. And I think every woman should have a power to fantasize. That's very important. And this is what I feel. And obviously, Kama Sutra didn't come from Japan. It came from India, which people don't even realize. And so initially, when I also wrote my first book, I was not sure if I need to share it on my family WhatsApp group.
Has your mom read it?
Yes.
Okay, so there we go.
So I shared it on my family WhatsApp group. There was sannata for some 10-15 minutes. But then my husband, who's also a writer, then he sent a message again that I'm proud to have a wife who has penned down her fantasies and all that.
Fabulous.
So then messages started pouring down, like reluctantly, mamas, mommies, and chachas and chachis, everybody they started messaging me. And I have a 9-year-old daughter. So obviously kids are inquisitive that what has mom written and all that. So, so she searched for my name on internet. That's a favorite thing, to search for a parent's name on net.
Yes.
Yeah. So she messaged me on my WhatsApp that I've seen your book, but the cover is shame, shame. So she asked me, when can I read the book? So I told her, when you grow up and you think there's no more shame, shame, you
I love
can,
that. When you think
read
it
the
is
book.
no more shame,
Yes.
shame. That's
Yes.
a very, very good way to
Yes.
put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, and since I've written on polyamorous relationship, so mostly people try to kind of, you know, figure out that am I a person who's all in a polyamorous relationship or not, or is this my fantasy? So yeah, these are the things which you...
I think with literature, I've always said that I wish life could be like literature, because
Yes.
literature is so much fun. But at the same time, I also feel that our real lives are more fictional than fiction itself, and fiction derives itself from real life. But I think a lot of times what happens as authors is that your author personality and your own personality, people start merging the two, which in a lot of cases is true. Like whenever I write, there's a lot of personal experiences coming in, but not necessarily, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So do you differentiate between
No,
those?
I think some part is your reality, some part is what you want to be or what you fantasize of. So yeah.
wish fulfillment
Yes,
kind of writing.
yes.
Have you ever had a lot of criticism that you are writing about sex because you know sex sells?
No, I don't think so. In fact, lot of women, they wrote to me on Twitter, they reached to me. I think they loved reading the book, and not so much criticism.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. Coming to you, Anita, I remember you mentioning that you make sure that it is as unconscious as any other part of your book, and you talk about food and you talk about heritage, and at the same time you make everything else become a part of it. Has there been criticism in terms of the way you focus on different aspects?
Yes and no, because I think the criticism actually comes from peers more than readers, because readers are more accepting of what is written. Peers sometimes do tend to question, because you do need a certain felicity to be able to write about food and sex well, because both are very sensual.
Indeed.
So there is a certain felicity that you need, and or it can just read like, you know, a menu card for a massage place or a restaurant, you know,
Indeed.
either way which you look at it. But when you are to take these two very important bodily functions and you turn it into a kind of fine artistic expression, then there is a certain lyricism that comes into it. And that lyricism is something that probably an average reader recognizes and discovers for the first time, that they are able to read something that gives expression to the way that they are thinking. Until then, they probably hadn't really been able to put it in words.
So it gives them a sense of belonging,
Yes, and a sense of validation.
a sense of validation.
Yes, you know, that this is how I feel about a kulfi, or this is how I feel about, you know, a kiss, whatever it is, you know. So, but what happens is that I do sometimes, I mean, not often, once in a while, I do kind of hear comments from peers about, oh, I can't write about food like Anita does, or I can't write about sex like Anita does. I was like, give it a shot. You don't know until you've written. You don't
Until
know
you have written,
if you
yes,
can, you know,
yes.
and don't look down upon it. It shouldn't only be death and disease that's celebrated,
Yes.
you know, and it shouldn't just be this romantic love that is celebrated. Let's also celebrate other things that make us this composite human being. So for me, I don't, you know, it doesn't bother me either way. I'm kind of like very insular in that sense. I mean, I write what I want to write. And if you want to read it, please do read it. If you don't want to read it, you're at liberty to put down the book and walk away. I mean, it's a kind of probably arrogant stance
No,
to
I
take,
think
but
that
there
is
is no
actually
other.
a very good way of taking criticism, because you take what you like and you leave what you think is not valid.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will again be one of those writers who's writing not to please yourself, but just to please the readers.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
that will not be you.
So in fact, I just have one yardstick for the, you know, the books that I write. I ask myself, is this a book that I would want to read?
Indeed.
If it's a book I want to read, then that's a book that I want to write, you know? So there's no other yardstick that I use for myself.
That's a fabulous mantra. I really, really like it. Talking about you, Aastha, I like the way you have included social media
Yeah.
to reach your readers. Tell us a little bit about it. How did that come about? What has that changed in the way literature is perceived nowadays?
I think it's a very easy way to reach out to people. I mean, you and I might have grown up reading books. I never got any gifts. I mean, but my birthday gifts, my parents only gave me books. So I grew up reading on the dining table. I grew up reading in the loo. I was reading all the time. But I don't think kids today read as much.
Sure.
And to reach to them, you have to be on a platform that they are on, which is something like Instagram or and I think if you're genuine and if you are putting out your words in the most raw form without trying to make it pretty, it'll relate to people because people want to read things that they feel. So most of the times I get things like, so I started writing poetry only a year ago. I didn't even know, again, I didn't know I could write poetry. I didn't think I was a poet. But I put down some stuff and then people started saying, oh my God, how do you know exactly what I'm feeling? And I wait in the morning to read. So most of my poetry, even if it's heartbreak, it always ends with the fact that you can be okay. You'll be okay, you know? And
so there's a very positive outlook to what
sometimes it's
you
savage.
write.
So you're like, I can do without you, you know, that kind of poetry,
Sass.
which
Very
always
important.
works. Yeah, which always works. So thank God you left my life kind of thing. And that also works because people feel, I think people feel alone, that only they have felt like this. But we've all felt like that.
Indeed.
So the fact is when they read it, they're like, oh my God, someone else somewhere feels like this. So yeah, so it happens to everybody. So if she got over it, I can get over it.
That
you know?
same sense of belonging and sense of validation, what we've been
Exactly.
speaking about.
Yeah.
Shradha, I also want to know, is your erotica feminist? I know it's a very loaded question I'm asking here, but I really want to know your perspective. How do you try, or how do you try to be assertive of a female voice in erotica for your protagonists? It's a very loaded question, I know, so feel free to answer it your way.
But I think you don't need to be very conscious about it. If, as a person, obviously, if you are feminist and you, the way you write your character will be in a very different light. When a man writes a woman character in an
Like,
erotica,
I
it's
felt
going to
that
be,
way about porn, right?
Yeah.
Because most porn is directed by men.
Yes.
As a woman, when you see it, you clearly know that it's been directed by a man.
Yeah.
And then you come across some really good erotica, or you come across some really good, which you can sense there is some femininity to it, there is a different gaze to it altogether. How does that work out in your writing? I'm really intrigued.
So that's what I said. You don't need to be very conscious about it, but when you are writing, and when, so when I'm writing from my point of view. And obviously, you are looking at a man in a different way.
Yes.
So not only a man is looking at you in a different way.
Yes.
So whenever you're writing it, obviously it transcends into a feminist kind of writing.
Right, because there is a kind of a inter-exchange of roles happening.
Yes.
It's not just a man seeking pleasure off of a woman, it's also a woman seeking off of a pleasure of a man. So it kind of, you're right, it unconsciously, subconsciously becomes an equal exchange in your writing.
And I think that sex is an important ingredient, but it's secondary to a strong storyline, plot, and characters. And my book is more about relationships, characters, about marriage, so different changing dynamics of marriage, relationships. So it's all about that.
So what brought about the idea of guilt pass?
So well, guilt pass is it's an imagination, it's a figment of imagination. But I'll admit that I know a person, I know a couple, they are in a
polyamorous situation.
Relationship. And I really was very intrigued. I tried to know about them. And then obviously I took my story from them and created
Was there a
something
lot of
around
research involved because you
Not
wanted
a lot
to...
of research, but yes, that couple was a trigger to write this book.
Oh, beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. And similar question to you as well, Anita. How does the whole feminist aspect, because I know, I did a poem recently at TEDx Gateway, at a TEDx event where I said, it really irks me every time someone says, so what is it like being a female writer? And I tell them, well, it's the same as being a male writer, except you don't get asked that question. Because we always get asked that question, because people, as I said in the beginning of the panel as well, people expect us to be setting an ideal. People expect us to be setting a righteous being or a feminist being. That's also an expectation in today's writing, whereas male authors do not have such expectations. Their characters can be whoever they want to be. They can be villainous, they can be full of debauchery and savagery, but as soon as we put that out, there is suddenly that societal gateway like, whoa, your protagonist is a bitch. So has that happened to you?
So I do write from both points of view, from the male and female point of view. So for me, I think as a writer, I mean, I become an asexual being. It really doesn't matter to me because I slip into the skin of that character at that point. So if I'm writing from the man's point of view, I'm actually thinking like a man. Every little detail, which means that I'm probably like asking the man I know, what does it make you feel if I were to say this word? What does it make you feel if I were to say this situation to you? I need to know. Right down to the way probably, you know, men hitch up their trousers, to putting your hands in your pockets, to whatever. Every
So there is
detail.
that much research
Absolutely.
involved?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I remember, I mean, in a book that I was writing about, and I was writing about a little boy being circumcised. And I was asking a few, and his father is witnessing it. The mother is Muslim, and the father is Hindu. And the father is kind of, you know, it's alien to him. So the whole idea of circumcision, what it, you know, it's just a thought, but what it does to him physically. So I was asking, you know, men, grown-up men, asking them, what does it make you feel if I were to say this? And I was able to use that, the reactions, in the writing of that particular episode.
Wow.
So I wouldn't be able to do that.
Because you can't imagine yourself in that
Absolutely,
scenario,
yeah,
right?
yeah. So obviously I'm at a greater level of comfort when I'm writing the female character because I, you know, can understand the physical sensations
And
of
the
many
feminine
things.
psyche at the same
and the
time.
feminine psyche. But again, I don't consciously set out to create this very feminist point of view. Mostly it is a journey for my characters who probably are like the average Indian woman who allows herself to be subservient because she doesn't know any other way to be. I'm not talking of the urban Indian woman who probably is a lot more conscious, but I'm
Sure.
talking about small town women. Again, in rural India, to some extent, you see women being assertive because they are tilling the soil and they're doing those kind of things. But in small town India, where women are kind of relegated to just being housewives and the jobs that they do is just a more glorified way of being this
Indeed.
good housewife. So you're a teacher or a bank clerk, or you know you have a job in the government service, like a clerical job or something like that. So there is no role where they come into their own. So most of the time, the characters I create are women drawn from these milieu.
Right.
So this journey of self-awareness, this journey of understanding what it is to be a woman, is probably mostly what my writing is all about.
Beautiful, beautiful. Talking about journeys, how does that work out in your work? Do your characters also take on a journey of self-awareness? And do you all consciously or unconsciously try to ensure that your character is giving the vision that you wanted to give? Or are there flawed characters?
I think we're all flawed, so we
I
can't write
agree.
about perfect characters. But to answer the question about the feminism, when I wrote my Mills and Boons, everybody said, you know, Mills and Boons are very regressive.
Yes.
And
patriarchal and
so they were like, you're a journalist and you're going to write, a regressive genre. And I remember reading 50 Shades of Grey and thinking that how I didn't like the lead character at all because she was really regressive to me because every time he made love to her or he said something nice to her, her inner dialogue says, oh my God, I can't believe it that he's loving me. And I'm like, but you should be awesome enough to know like, okay, anybody can love you and
Yes.
that's the way you're supposed to be loved. So I found that regressive and that book did so well.
It did so well.
Exactly.
And I completely agree with you about that book. It's a great genre to
Yeah.
talk about because before that, BDSM wasn't very much spoken of in
Exactly,
popular literature.
exactly.
But the idea that it is Anna,
Anna,
right? It is
yeah.
Anna who is giving him the power,
Yeah.
is allowing him the power, was never explored in the book.
Exactly.
Because it was she who allowed him to have that level of control, which is
and he's
completely
teaching
negated.
her or he's like every time he does something, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe a man who looks like him, who is like him, likes me, you know. So when I wrote the Mills and Boons, I mean, she was a journalist. She has her own agency. Keeping it with the Mills and Boons format, he's a successful businessman, but she's successful in her own way. And I think people like us who write these books today will get that into our books because we are like that. So the only thing you can do is put yourself in the book, and it will be feminist by itself. Like, yes. I've been married for 12 years. I have never woken up and made tea one day in my life. My husband always makes it.
There you go. There's a tip out there.
Yeah, like one day he told me, he's like, I'm going to leave at 6 in the morning. Will you get up and make tea? I said, if you want, I'll get up. And he's like, no, don't do that. That's not you. I'll be like, who is this person, you know? So I think the way we are in real life is what we should take out in our books. And I think we are all feminist, independent women who are equal in every relationship. So I write keeping that in. I don't even keep that in mind. It's natural for me. I think that's a consensus here, that is such a subconscious layer of our writing that it just comes across, and it doesn't have to be constructed or artificial in any way. So just before I wrap up the panel, has there been a lot of pressure on you to now continue writing erotica?
Obviously, when you write one book, there's no pressure. But purposely, I want to write erotica because that is one genre which I really feel very comfortable with. And I really want erotica to be seen in a very different light. Like we all discussed, there are very few Indian eroticas. And Indian tales, they need to come out, not Linda and Dave, and so we need more Indian names.
Yeah,
and
not
more
that we
Indian
have anything
stories.
against it. It's just that we want our children to grow up also reading about characters that look like themselves and sound like themselves.
Yes. Yeah. But as I said, that sex is not the only thing. Relationships, I think they are the most important. That's the most important aspect of my writing. And I've been in radio. I've got so many calls. I used to host a show, late night show, and I used to get so many calls. Like you feel that, oh my God, there's so many people who are waiting to connect to anybody because they're so lonely. They have so many stories to tell. They have so much advice to seek, like what Aastha said. People are reaching out to her on Instagram, and things have actually changed. Like I got to know that Snapchat has a Snapchat counselor now.
Oh.
Yeah,
Snapchat counselor.
Yeah, because the young ones, they are mostly on Snapchat.
Yes.
And they have like relationship issues and they want to go and reach out to somebody. So they are Snapchat counselors who are there on Snapchat, and Snapchat mein you have this thing of putting any face
using
icon.
those filters.
Yeah,
yes.
so people use filters and they are asking
serious
important
questions.
Questions. So people want to reach out. There so many stories. There are so many things which people want to say. And working in radio, it's given me that power to get connected to people, and I think everybody has some relationship issues and problems, and so that fascinates me and interests me.
Interesting.
So it's not just erotica, but yeah, relationship is something very important, and that's always going to be in my...
A part of your writing.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Lovely. Anita, what about you? What's your next book about? Is there a particular theme that your readers expect from you?
So I've kind of been surprising my readers with every new book. I kind of change the genre that I'm primarily a literary fiction writer, but once in a, I do also have a series of crime novels. So I'm now going back to literary fiction. And the new book, which would be out in October of this year, is called Eating Wasps. It is very, very strongly woman-oriented. I don't like using the word feminist, but it is a very, it's a book about women, about what it is to be a woman, and the various pressures, the various dilemmas, the various triumphs also of how women, kind of, So It's a novel which has the stories of 10 women interlinked into it.
Wow.
So that's what I have.
And I
coming
love
up.
the title, Eating Wasps. Make sure you have a look out for that. That is amazing. And the same question goes for you. Have your readers put you in that genre, saying, okay, this is what she's going to write, and this is what we expect out of her? And has that ever been a consideration or a pressure?
I mean, as I said, I write about love, and they expect me to. So they've just, when I meet people now, they don't tell me their love stories, though. They're like, you're going to write about it. But yes, I think I have become that person who gives advice and writes about love. But I'm okay with that. I am that person in real life as well. So it's great to keep with who you are. My next book is an erotica with Juggernaut as well.
There you go.
Yes, but I think I really like what I'm doing on Instagram, and I write poetry every day because that makes me reach out to people in a way that I don't think our books do most of the time.
I think this is a good time to plug your Instagram handle.
Yeah, it's Aastha, at Aastha Atray. But yeah, so I will keep doing that because as Shradha also said, I like reaching out to people, and I think the best validation comes in form of when people message you and say, you changed my life, or you made me feel better.
Yes.
And I thought I was really sad today, but reading what you said made me feel better, and that's all I need in life, really. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. So ladies, I would thank you for being not
Thank you
so
so much.
right, but at the same time being extremely right in what you all are doing. I think it is very important to provide this variety of voices in the current Indian literature scenario, and I'm so glad that we are all on the right path. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Check, check. All right. Can we have a huge round of applause, everyone out there? Thank you, everyone. May I request Daniel Zagowski to felicitate lovely ladies? Please come on the stage. Thank you so much for your words. Thank you so much for sharing your views, your pointers. Thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put your hands together once again for this lovely session.